right, hello everybody. Welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today is episode 174, and I have a much revered guest back on the channel with me, good friend and music lover, Tim Humphrey. Tim, as many of you know, is the label boss of the Rediscovery label, bringing classics from the early 90s in the trance and ambient genre back to life on vinyl. And he is also a very prominent Discogs commenter. Even to this day, Tim, I constantly find your reviews on Discogs, and I end up adding something to the wish list or kind of certifying it as something that I should buy based on comments that you've made. So yeah, I really appreciate that. And Tim and I met via this channel probably 5 years ago, and we've developed into friends since then. And it's been like a really nice add-on, something that I've taken away from this channel that has really made my life a little bit better. So Tim, it's really great to have you on the channel today.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And it's great to see you again. And thanks for having me again.
Yeah, no problem. So as the title suggests, we are doing a top 10 for Huge Choons, which is I almost feel silly even saying that label name out loud because I'm not Pete Tong and I'm not rocking the the British Cockney slang, but we're doing a top 10. The format for this is that Tim and I don't know what each other's picks are, so there might be overlap there, but I doubt it because Tim and I tend to have different eras that we've gravitated towards. But I think this is really going to be good here, and we also are not specifically, as far as I know, I haven't ranked mine in any kind of ascending or descending order. We're just gonna each throw 5 picks at each other and just kind of bounce some ideas off of each other and see what we've come up with here. So actually, let me do like a quick little summary on the label for my perspective and what I know about it. Huge to me. Well, the label kicked off in 1990, and it's still technically active now. They're doing reissues on vinyl, and they're doing MP3s. It was started by a guy named Red Jerry, who is a producer that is on the label as a producer and a remixer on a lot of the records there. I don't know too much about Red Jerry, but I do thank him for taking the time to curate and organize such a monster label. My view of Huge Choons is mostly in the rearview mirror. Even though I was partying while a lot of these tunes were coming out back in the day in the late 90s and early 2000s, it's something that I missed the boat on. It was like I was fixated on the Jersey, New York culture, tribal and hard house and hard trance and all the stuff that was happening in Philly, big vocals. And Huge Choons to me is something that was happening overseas. So a lot of these tracks that I'm talking about, I don't have a ton of context for them because I wasn't getting exposed to them when I was going out to clubs back in the day. These tracks are things that other people have recommended or that I've dug up on Discogs, and now I'm looking back at them with maybe 20 years of hindsight on them. Some of them, like to me, the label's like a little bit kind of confined by the fact that it's a mostly like late 90s and 2000s label, and that's not really entirely my sound, but there's still some serious gems in there that obviously I've got a stack of 10 here to potentially talk about depending on what Tim chooses. And I do think it's a high quality label, just something that I don't have a lot of nostalgia with, but I do have a lot of respect for. And Tim, do you want to kind of weigh in on the label and let me know what you think of it from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the UK was huge with progressive house. In 92, 93, 94, and like Guerrilla Records and Hooj too. A lot of people don't know that Hooj started out more as a house label than really a trance label, and so that kind of progression into progressive house was kind of natural. And then I was I think the challenge with picking these 5 was, when some of the tracks, they feel like huge tunes, but then I started looking at them and I was like, oh, they're on another label. Oh, that's right, that was on the different label. And so a lot of the ones that I would normally pick, if I pick my favorite 5 that
Hmm.
Huge Tune ever put out, I always call it Huge Tunes too, even though it's huge. But even if I pick my top five, like all five would be different ones than I picked today. But I really wanted to pick a combination of ones that were maybe a little bit lesser known,
Hmm.
but ones that were special to me still that I feel like are still kind of relevant. But there's so many, like you said, there's so many tracks in here that are like kind of like synonymous with like like mixed CDs as they got popular in like 97, 98. Kind of I wasn't too much into the Cream series or Oakenfold or Pete Tong. That was still kind of like the pop side, and so I was kind of like hearing stuff on there, but I kind of knew that was kind of like the popular stuff. And then of course you had Gate Crasher and all those kind of mix CDs around 97, 98. I think Global Underground was still one of the better ones of the popular side,
Hmm.
but I mean, Hooj was like so huge. And then when I look back at the time, there was definitely some time, probably around 99, 2000, where it wasn't cool to listen to Hooj because they were so popular and
Right.
their tracks were so huge. But I think, from like 96, 95 to like 98, 99, they definitely had some, I mean, huge tracks, but it was strange when I was looking into how many of them were on other labels, and then I
Hmm.
even some of them I forgot that Cooge Tune even brought out.
Yep.
Like Miro Paradise was one that I was like, oh, I forgot they even put that out. And then Cafe Del Mar, which I know more from IQ Records. Also, Sacred Cycles I know more from Brainiac Records.
Hmm.
So there was tracks that I wanted to choose that are classics to me, but I felt kind of strange in picking them, so I don't want to give them so much attention because they just kind of reissued and sort of did remixes of other labels' classic and kind of took them and got more well known for them. So, in that respect, kind of looking back, it's kind of an interesting uh, angle because they're so popular, but then at the same time, they were more popular already on other labels, and who just made them even more popular. I guess probably they had better distribution at that point, and really kind of trance and progressive house started to get big in America around 97, 98. And then that kind of led to the bigger club days and kind of out of the warehouse rave days of the middle 90s. But I
Hmm.
mean, a lot of great music. I mean, it's definitely period music for sure. It's hard to come back to some of the trance tracks, but there's. I hope the five tracks that I chose that people would still be like, oh, that's still cool. Because as me and you as DJs, we always want to pick the lesser known tracks, but we want to pick the timeless tracks that still work today that we can sort of fit in today. I think it's important.
Yeah, I agree with you. There were some classics that I have on my shelf that would have been really low hanging fruit, but to your point, they were almost too obvious, and they were also come out. They came out originally on other labels, so it made Huge more of like a reissue plus a remix as compared to like the original founder or discoverer of the music initially.
Yeah,
So I agree with you there. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So it's kind of
kind of.
bitter. I guess it's kind of bittersweet in the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
way.
yeah. It's a mainstream label, but they know that. Where if somebody from Huge watched this, they know what they were doing. They were just a wildly popular label overseas.
Yeah,
Just bringing classics up. So yeah, you okay with going starting here, going through the
sure,
list?
sure,
Okay,
sure.
this one here, as far as I know, is an OG. I chose Medway's Resurrection EP. Are you familiar with this one?
That I have Medways in my. I just put Medway because Fat Bastard EP, and then Resurrection, and then of course Release.
Yeah.
All those tracks. Those are all my honorable mention.
Yeah, yeah. Medway appears on Huge at least four times as an original artist. You said the My Release, Fat Bastard, which I guess is like an Austin Powers takeoff. I'm guessing it probably came out around the same time as Austin Powers 2, where I think that's where Fat Bastard made his appearance. Maybe not. What else did they? There was another. Uh, there's another silver one. Yeah, the Elements EP. That
Okay.
one's pretty strong too. But I chose Resurrection because of the A track, Resurrection. I thought it was this came out in 1998, and I thought it was like really fresh, progressive house, kind of fused with semblances of deep house and also a little bit of dub. And maybe I'm making a stretch with the dub, but there's a really nice progressive sounding breakdown in the middle of the track. And when it comes out of it, there's this like crazy 4 note bass line that is introduced in the second half of the record. And to me, it kind of had like a dub type feel to it, as if like Medway has dub influences, and he's like, how can I sneak this into a progressive house track? But when I listen to that bass line, I can just picture somebody like tapping out the keys. Like there's something raw about it where you can picture somebody manually playing it. And even though it has that simplicity to it, I think the bass line just crushes when you turn it up at high volume. So to me, for a 1998 record, this aged super well, and I would highly recommend adding it to your collection. Go ahead with your first pick, Tim.
Okay, cool. Um, yeah, that's a good pick. That's my honorable mention there. The great thing about Medway is I was gonna say while you were talking, but I didn't want to interrupt you. His bass lines just, I mean, they were so recognizable, and they really cut through there, and I think they were a little bit more gritty, maybe a little bit deeper. But I definitely agree with you on the dub aspect.
Hmm.
It is kind of in that vein, and it was a little bit, wasn't a lot going on in his tracks, but the bass lines and the rhythms always kind of like really hit home for me too, as well, especially my
Hmm.
release. I mean, that track was sick.
Yeah.
It was really tough not to pick that track. My number five pick comes from, and I couldn't find the vinyl. And one thing a lot of people will know about me once they get to know me is I if I like the song, I'll generally have the CD and the vinyl. And so I couldn't find the vinyl, but I do have the CD here, a little bit easier to find because my CDs are alphabetized, but my vinyl is everywhere. And this is the Future Grooves Volume 2, which was a 4-track compilation. And it has a Circulation on here, their track called Gray, and also Lime. But there's a track, and I've never ever heard this artist before, and it's called Z. They're called Z2, and it's the last track, and it's called Black Finished Chrome, and it's just a really good example of. I felt like, and maybe it goes with the Future Grooves title. This was Hooj trying to branch out a little bit and try to maybe identify themselves or rebrand themselves into being a little bit more cutting edge, even though Circulation is, I mean, I guess it's kind of more tech house, with Circulation. So they were trying to, I guess, sort of evolve into some deeper music, even though it didn't really pan out. But this particular track is so much different, and there's a really cool vocal on it that's kind of like a vocoder, and it says, "Music is like black finished chrome." And it's kind of like a slight electro, kind of a slight tech house break in there. The vocal sample is really good, but the melody is really strong in this throughout, and it has like a crystallized melody where it's really kind of, every time I play it, still it kind of gets my attention. I think it was from '99 or 2000, so sort of at the later stages of me even checking the Hooj tune,
Hmm.
bin, but I did find this on CD, and I did track down a vinyl probably shortly after. But it's a track that I would still probably play today, and I think it still works out in like tech house kind of set, and it's still fun to play, and it's really kind of like a fresh breath of air. If you listen to a lot of who's like progressive house, it feels like a breath of fresh air. It's so different than whatever they put out, and that's my number five, Z2's Black Finish Chrome.
The music was like the music was like the music was
Awesome review, Tim. So you mentioned Circulation, which helped me decide what I was going to choose as my next record. Maybe you see this one coming now. I went with Circulation's Turquoise. Now, we were talking when this episode started about Huge being a reissuer, and this is not a unique release to the Huge catalog. Turquoise actually exists as Mix 1 and Mix 2 on their own Circulation Color Series label. Here you're getting a reissue with a different gear remix, and there's a second part of this which is remixed by Weekend World, which is also a really good remix. But I'm sticking with the original as my pick. I think it shows a lot of diversity in Huge's catalog. Like, I think of them as kind of faster, harder, 130-ish BPM type music. And now that I'm thinking about it, this might even be 128 or 130. But to me, it sits more firmly in the deep house category. Outdoor, breezy, sunshine kind of music. You could play this at night, and I think it would still make everybody's skin feel kind of tingly when the synths came in. But fundamentally, to me, it's a daytime record. And I made a Circulation episode that got a really good response on my channel, and I somehow forgot this because it wasn't in the color series. I don't have the actual color series Turquoise, so I overlooked this, and people were like, "What about Turquoise?" And I was like, "Oh man, I forgot to put Turquoise in my own Circulation episode." But I would say this is like probably one of their top 3 tracks that they've ever done. It's smooth, it's timeless, it's perfect. And really, really nice cover art here, kind of is emblematic of the sound that's contained within. So again, this is Circulation's Turquoise, and I'm not sure if this is fundamentally Mix 1 or Mix 2, but it is the same track that appears on one of the sides of the original Circulation vinyl.
So mine were actually in a row, but I'm gonna skip a track and go with my what was my number three, and I might as well mention it now. It's Turquoise Circulation. I do have it on vinyl as well, but I couldn't find it, so here's the CD. And I agree with you in everything you said. I do like the different. I think the Weekend World remix is a little bit more atmospheric. The Different Gear has sort of a different bass line, but I always played the original, and whether it makes A or B, I could never remember which one it was. I do have both of the Color series here on CD as well. Dude, if you don't have these, definitely those are good pickups for very cheap. You probably get like $3-4, and you get a lot of great tech house on it. But this one always kind of like hit a. It's kind of like what you said. It's something that you can listen to in the daytime. It was kind of like as I don't know about you, but as I kind of got a little bit older, and I wanted to listen to music during the day that was still kind of atmospheric and deep, and kind of you wanted to listen to stuff during the day as well. And when I found like Circulation stuff, it was just kind of like that perfect kind of early night sets, stuff that wasn't too imposing. It was kind of like really nice. And the nice thing about the Color series and just in general, like which goes back to like Studio One or there's so many different labels, and of course now I'm blanking on them, but they use the Color series as like a sort of like a mood, or maybe a sort of like you said, like it's blue, so it's more like aquatic. Like there's also the Aqua Circulation and also Topaz,
Hmm.
and so those ones are generally a little bit more, I guess, more aquatic sounding or maybe lighter sounding, kind of like you're saying. And the blue series always was one of my favorite of those, and then the green ones were sort of house. Like when you think of the first one, their release was green, and then um, I can't remember the other green one, but those were generally a little bit more deep
Emerald.
house. Amber, yeah,
No, Emerald.
Emerald, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
those ones were a little bit more towards deep house. I felt like where the blue ones were just a slight aquatic kind of feel, and maybe that was just because of the color, but. It's funny you mentioned that, and so I guess we're going to overlap already. But like you said, it's got to be one of my top three Circulation tracks as well. So Turquoise, I had to put it in there. But I totally agree with you. The original version kind of, I think it's the most cleanest, and maybe the maybe a little bit slower than the. I think, well, actually, when I think about it now, yeah, the original version's kind of fast, but there is I can never remember if it's the B version or A version or they have one or two. But the other ones seems just a little bit slower. Maybe it's the original, but
Hmm.
I can never remember. But every track is very similar. I mean, every remix is very kind of similar, and the melodies are always pretty much the same, and they're all about 7 to 8 minutes. So it's always hard for me to remember which remix it is, but I always remember Weekend World is probably the mix that mostly everybody goes to,
Hmm.
probably the most atmospheric. But I do like the ones that are a little bit more simpler and more. I think the melody sticks out a little bit more in that version. But that's my number four pick, Turquoise by Circulation.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tim. And I'm going to include samples in this episode. So I have the Weekend World version somewhere. I'll have to dig that up, and we'll give everybody a sample of the Weekend World so that we can feature that plus the original Turquoise. And because we're talking about Weekend World, the perfect segue into my next pick, I went with Echo Men's Truth. I believe this is a 2002 record. Echo Men by themselves, that's Chris Scott and a guy named Anton. I can't remember his last name, but they were always low-key 5-star progressive house producers to me. Echo Men appears on Forensic a few times with Spirit and Radar, and I think is there one called Womb, or am I making that up? I don't know. There's Substance, and they also appeared on Saw a couple of times with the Cure EP, which had the Dragon dub on it that was really cool. So anyways, if I look at the Echo Men catalog on Discogs, it's green lit all the way down the side. And Weekend World to me is somebody I missed him up until recently, and I went on this big progressive house binge trying to dig up all the progressive house classics that I could find from 2002 to 2005, and Weekend World I found was somebody that you could buy pretty much blind. He might have 1 week original release out of his entire 15 in his catalog, and his remixes are also something to behold here. So the track Truth, combining Weekend World with Echo Men, it was a recipe for a complete win. I thought it had a unique kind of computerized male vocal and just a really smooth rolling progressive atmosphere that if you were ever going to do a progressive house classics throwback night and you wanted to take people back to that '03 moment where progressive house hit its peak, I think you could play a track like this and it would go down well. So again, this is Echo Men's Truth featuring Weekend World on the remix.
That I saw you, you changed my direction. From a lie you gave the truth.
If I can add something to that, I think the cover, that speaker, is very much like your new speakers that you got at the time. I think those were Genelec speakers, if I'm not mistaken. They might not. They could be the lower model of the Genelec speakers, but those were like your Adams back in like 2003.
Oh,
So those were great speakers for studios. Like most of the studios that I would go into, they had especially the people that made music. Genelecs were like great speakers, and I think I'm pretty sure those are Genelecs, but those are still be good finds if you could find those speakers. But you know the funny thing is when we talked a couple days ago, and you mentioned what should we do a video on, and you're like, oh, let's do Hooj. The one, because by 2003 I was totally out of Hooj for sure. And the one artist that I did find that I didn't know about that I really liked their sound is I checked out the Echo Men's, and those ones are really good.
mm-hmm.
I sort of heard of them, but I sometimes get confused with Nova Men. I'm not sure if you ever heard of Nova Men, but
No.
yeah, they did some stuff on some other labels, and they sort of did a progressive house and tech house during the same years. And so when people say Echo Men, I always thought they meant Nova Men. And but I really liked what I heard on some of those Echo Men. So yeah, I'm kind of jealous. I'd probably trade you for that record if you like.
Okay.
My number 3 pick is is probably one of the earliest ones that I liked, and it was 1992, and it was this is actually the dance street version. It's called "Make You Whole," and it's called the artist called Andrew Meeks, I believe this is Andrew Meekus. Sorry, that's gonna be backwards on the screen, anyways. But yeah, Hooj, released this a couple years later, and this particular record is kind of like a Euro house meets progressive house because it's right on the cusp of 1992 at the time. But what it does is it samples a track from 1990 from this artist called Daisy D, and she did a song called Crazy, and it actually broke into the top 100 of America charts. So it brought went into the mainstream and it was played a lot. And the sample of that, or the chorus of that, was super catchy. And if you once you hear it, you'll instantly recognize it, even if you don't know it by name. But this artist right here is a guy named Patrick. I was blank on it. Patrick DeMeyer, and he later went to Technotronic, which of course did Pump Up the Jam. But
Yeah.
he joined them a little bit after that, and but he made this, and so it's very Technotronic, Pump Up the Volume, or excuse me, Pump Up the Jam, sort of bass line, and it's kind of that early Belgian style of new beat, sort of going into progressive house, right around 1990, but 1990, 92. So it uses that sample from the Daisy D tracks and sort of turns it into a really good house track. And it's around 7.5 minutes, whether you use the original version or the Smoke and Joe's remix, which just got reissued last year, but just kind of a classic. And this really kind of blew up. And it got fairly popular on the underground. A lot of people played this, and when you look through the Huge catalog, you'll see people like Pete Tong and Boy George and stuff. They all used to play this track, so it definitely is one of those tracks from Belgium that crossed over into UK house, which was I wouldn't say is super rare for the time, but kind of a little bit different because most of the Belgium were still doing hardcore and stuff like that. In fact, Patrick DeMeyer is known mostly for his track called Anastasia from the artist T99 in 1991, and that's a huge hardcore rave track that everybody knows. If you heard it, you would know it instantaneously, and that's kind of a huge Belgian hardcore track that he was most known for. But this one's a kind of a really cool house track that he still did. It still works today in kind of a Italo house, kind of almost ambient house, but still kind of a little bit of Euro house in there. So really cool track, and that's Make You Whole.
All right, my fourth pick appears on the Huge Classics reissue series, and I went with Space Maneuvers Stage 1, the Separation Mix. Space Maneuvers is a very early alias for John Graham, who is well known as Quiver, and I think this is a great example of where artists tend to hit their best stride right out of the gate when they first start producing. I mean, John he has a lot of aliases, and he might have been producing in the mid '90s under some more obscure aliases. But I would say where he really started to blow up probably is when he released Stage One, which was originally released in 1998 on a different label. So Huge didn't come and get it until maybe a year or two later, I believe, or possibly even further
I
down.
think you're right, 99. I think you're
Yeah,
right, 99.
was it? Yeah, yeah. But it's a really unique track. I think it's a great example of early proto trance ambient. I mean, this seems like, I don't know how you feel about this, Tim, but this seems like a track that would have been right up your alley back in the day. Like it's high. There you go. It's high tempo but low energy at the same time. Like when I listen to it, I always think it's a slower track than it actually is. And the elements that are in it are so obviously early 90s that I find it to be very charming. The space chatter, I've commented a couple of times before on songs that have space chatter. There's something just, I don't know, like kind of like masculine and isolating at the same time, because I guess because inherently anybody that's out in space is by themselves, and it has that reverb on it, and it just has a way of making you feel like you've actually been transported out of the atmosphere and into the place that the song is occurring. But I think most people would agree that this is like a low-key masterpiece. I've noticed that trying to DJ this, even though it's high tempo, it's low energy, so you have to be careful where you try to place this in a set. Like if you were building up a really nice upward arcing progressive house set, and then you try to sneak this in, I think you'll find that when you do your crossfade or your blend, you're going to find that the energy level drops even though the BPM stays the same. So it needs to be placed strategically and carefully. But for passive listening, I think that this is absolutely ace and something that should be in everybody's early 90s or late 90s catalog.
Nice. No, you nailed it. In fact, I guess I might as well skip to my number one. And this is my favorite Hooj as well. And it's the Total Separation mix, like you said, which, again, I have it on CD as well. So when you were saying if it was 1999 or 2000, I was like, 1999. So yeah, and I agree with you on how you mix it too, because it feels like a track that's not very dynamic. Like it feels like it needs to be remastered, like to bring out a little bit more of the dynamics. It does feel very hollow, which is strange because I love the sounds in there, like the spacey sounds, like you're saying, and the little bleeps and stuff like that. And I love anything that has to do with like spacey melodies or like you said, spacey talking. In fact, I wasn't going to bring it out, but I just happen to have it here. And I always look for really odd records like this. Like this is a 45 from 1962, and it's basically just a conversation about a person in orbit and him talking. And so that's all it is. So it's a really cool track to just echo out and put it over the top of a mix and just play different parts, because he just kind of talking like that. Just did it occur? Negative. Just things like that, like in the track. And it's really cool. So I like to sample that record a lot. But I mean, John Quiver was, and of course he did Transport 3, I think it was, or Transport 4, the mix series. Of course, the Oakenfold did the first Transport, right? And then I think second one was maybe Ralph or something. I can't remember, DJ Ralph or something like that. And Quiver did the fourth one. So at the time, he was huge in on the West Coast, because I think some of his progressive sort of got into a little bit of breaks, and breaks were huge in the West Coast. But Quiver always did really good bass lines. But I mean, Space Maneuvers is just, I was going to save it for number one, but I might as well just jump on your bandwagon. Just a great track. And, it does feel very 90s in so many ways, but there's not too many tracks. I think one of the key things about it too, and I always preach about this, I feel like, or I always feel like I point this out because it seems like we're in the times of big drops and big buildups, right? We had buildups with trance, we had drops with EDM and stuff like that, or dubstep, whatever it is. But the buildups and drops, if you can even call them that, in that track, they're so subtle, and they do very quickly. And it does. There's two drops in the track because there's two breaks in the separation mix, the longer version, and both times they just slightly build up from the first break to the second break as far as intensity. And it just does it so, I guess, so, it's just so classy, it just feels effortlessly. It's not trying too hard. There's a little drum loop, a little drum, and then just kind of drops. There's nothing overly done, just really beautiful, and stays in the sweet spot. And I think it's a track that it's just always, it's just such a classic. I have a really good friend, and it's one of his favorite tracks. And sometimes I'll get on the phone with him, and I'll just say, "Did it occur?" And he'll be like, "Negative." And it's just because we love this track so much. It's just epic. I love it so much. But yeah, it's my number one pick. But I'll put it at number two with you.
Thanks for that, Tim. You just helped me realize what he was saying. I didn't know that it was "Did it occur?" Obviously, I could make out the negative part, but now I'll know what he was saying the whole time. So I see that I'm going to edit this part out, but we have 1 minute left in the Zoom session because I have the free license, and it's going to force us out of here. Oh. So I think then it's going to force a 10 to 15 minute break. And then I'll be able to start up a new session. So we both have one record left to do, right?
Yeah, one.
Okay. All right. So we'll come back from the break, and we'll do our last picks, okay? So my fifth and final pick for you is a little bit eccentric. This is a tribal house pick, and for me, tribal house, for the most part, hasn't aged very well. It's a genre that I was really into when I was partying a lot back in 2002, 3 up to 2008. But the older I've gotten and the further I've gotten away from the tribal house sound, the less respect I ultimately have for it. It to me just hasn't aged well. But I did want to show off some of the variety of what Hooj was offering to its fans back in the day. So my pick here is DJ Ross Soul's "Oh Baby." The vocal from this is actually from an artist, Ready for the World, that did the track "Oh Sheila" in 1985, and that track was, to me, when I first Shazammed it, I was standing in a grocery store, and I thought that for sure was going to be a Prince track, because it reminded me a lot of the drums and the rhythm in when Doves Cry. And it surprised me that it was this other kind of 80s one-hit wonder that I had never heard of before. But that's the vocal that's featured in here, and it was remixed by Choons and Ceballos. So Choons and Ceballos were the curators of Stereo, a label that I have a lot of, and I'd be willing to get rid of probably most of them that I have at this point. Like they just I never reach for tribal when it comes down to what am I going to listen to tonight, which I think says a lot about the genre. But this is something that I would hold on to even with my ultimate potential disregard for for tribal house in the early 2000s. But yeah, Choons and Ceballos here also included some melodic elements to it that I thought made this stand out from the rest of their catalog and made it kind of like an eccentric choice for Huge to put out. And I think this came out back in 2002. But go on Discogs, look at people's reviews. You can see other people like this and have pretty high regard for it as well.
I had such a huge crush on Sheila E. in like 1985. I mean, that track was huge. And like we were talking about earlier, that track was recorded in, I'm pretty sure, I'm like 99% sure Prince recorded that in his studio because she was sort of a protege of Prince as well as the other girl who had a hit a couple of years earlier. Um, I'm blanking on her name, but she was like in lingerie and stuff like that, and she had a big track as well. It was Prince wrote that as well, which I'm blanking on the name. He was it was in that kung fu movie. She was in that kung fu movie too. Leroy. Um,
Yeah, I don't know.
it's like a African American sort of kid. It's almost like Different Strokes meets a kung fu movie. Anyways, Last Dragon. That's what it's called, Last
Oh,
Dragon.
okay.
Have you never seen that movie?
No.
Okay, it's really kind of like a kung fu ghetto movie, and you probably have heard of the bad guy because he's like glowing and it's kind of has like a Japanese kind of martial arts side to it. It's kind of like it's almost like arcade like in a way, but it's oh man, yeah, I got it on Blu-ray. I'll have to give it to you sometime. But
Okay.
yeah, good pick. My pick is also kind of along the same lines as something that's kind of a little bit different that than Hooch kind of normally put out. This is Trendsetters who came from Touche label and the track called Synergy, and it's the Kenneth Graham remix. And I work with Kenneth Graham. I help manage his back catalog and a lot of his work that he's coming out with now. And he's a really good friend, but honestly, 100% honest, if he still wasn't a good friend, I would still put this record in this list. And it comes in my second favorite Hooch record behind Stage One, Space Maneuvers. But this is probably the deepest track on Hooch tunes that I can think of. It's very atmospheric. It sounds like you're in a cave. It's pushing about 12 minutes long, so it's definitely a long builder. And it even, Blackwatch is on the second side, who I know you know Blackwatch, and he's done some pretty good stuff, back in the day. Wasn't he on Saw Records? We've talked about him in the past, Saw recordings. I think Hamill and Black Witch or Blackwatch, right?
Yep, I
Um,
have I have a lot of Blackwatch records, and there's one
yeah,
with
and
the
he does
black
some.
and with a black and red logo that just crushes it. I can't think of the name, but I'll be able to dig it up and
Yeah,
drop an image of it in here.
yeah, and so I mean, he is totally outdone on this track, and I really loved a lot of his stuff back then. And a couple years later, Kenneth actually sent me the promo copy too, so I got the promo copy in here. I love sleeves like this when you can put extra records in there, or
Mhm.
the promo copy, or double versions, or whatever it mixes well within, with you can put it in there together, so you don't have to grab different records. You got two really good tracks that mix well together. I love plastic sleeves, but just love that track so much. It's Kenneth Graham to the T, and it kind of adds a little bit because Kenneth's from Los Angeles, kind of adds um, more of a techno side to what Hooj was doing, and it's definitely unique, and especially because I think it was around 99 2000, and when you look at like Hooj catalog, it's very different than what's on their label around that time. So yeah, it's my favorite, my second favorite, Kenneth Graham's Synergy track from remix from Trendsetters, who did a lot of great tracks on Touche. I think their most popular one was Roaches, of course,
Mhm.
and I'm blanking on some of the other Plasmids. I think was that other one. They had a big track, but yeah, they went back from they were from from the Netherlands, early '90s. They did a lot of great stuff on the Touche label.
That's awesome, Tim. And I was looking on Discogs, and I do have that record. I don't know where it is. I know it's in my basement somewhere, but I'm gonna have to dig it up because now I'm really excited to listen to it.
Yeah,
So
it's a deep one. It's a deep one.
yeah,
It still works today, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. I'll find it this weekend. I'm hell bent. So
Tell me what you think of it. Text me.
yeah, yeah, and I like your idea too of sneaking the promo or the test in with the other record. I never thought of doing that, but that's genius, dude. I never thought of adding two records to the same sleeve deliberately.
Yeah, well, I like to keep stuff like if I have any kind of like memorabilia, whether it be like an inner sleeve or obviously I try to keep that stuff together if it's a promo sleeve or you got some, even if it's I got like a Kraftwerk record. I went and saw them in 3D, and so I put the 3D glasses I got from the concert. I put it inside the record. So, if I have any kind of like article or something like that, sometimes I tuck them in, with a record, just kind of keep the memorabilia together. Like if you had like, if I was, sometimes I wish I had some of the rave flyers that I had from back in the day,
Yeah,
like in the '90s. Imagine putting those in with the record, like that you heard that time. How cool is that? Like that would have been like something, if I was kind of collecting that stuff now and didn't think about it then, but any kind of thing that kind of jogged memories of where I first heard it or DJ who played it or something like that. Like, it's kind of cultivating and curating those memories or
yeah,
collecting them in a way.
yeah. That's great stuff, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're full of good ideas, and you've taught me a lot since I've known you, just with little nerdy nuances of music. That's like we've hit the highest level thinking about adding multiple records to the same sleeve. That's serious stuff.
Yeah. No, no, it's fun to good idea with the Hooves because it's doing this video because it's kind of it's one that I wouldn't have thought of,
Yeah.
but it definitely kind of brings us back to where, that time when electronic music was getting really big in the clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
I talk a lot about like when the warehouse raves ended in like 96, 97.
Mm-hmm.
It went into like super clubs started like Giant and Spunday and well, I guess Twila was still going out East Coast, but Spunday was big in San Francisco and LA, and Giant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you heard of those clubs.
No,
Uh,
but
yeah, those were kind of like the biggest West, but they were so big, and they just totally changed it. It lost that warehouse vibe.
yeah.
But these kind of tracks like Hooj Tunes was kind of like the sound of those clubs in a lot of ways. Like I have a friend that I still keep in contact. His name is Sean Ray, and I met him at the Giant Club I think it was 2001, and he handed me a CD, and we stayed in contact through the last 25 years
Mm-hmm.
because we just kind of started talking. And I look back in that CD, and I bet she played like four or five Hooch tunes just in that mix. Like that was
Oh,
just kind
okay.
of like the sound
The
of.
sound of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know Medway is on that track, the release, and Roach is
Mm-hmm.
on there and stuff like that. Just
Yeah.
yeah, really good tracks that went over really well in the clubs.
Yep. For sure.
And I think and in some ways there's still like they're not like they've kind of aged, but they haven't aged in a bad way. And I think that's the best thing you can hope for in stuff that was popular. Like it aged in a good way. At least it did that.
Yep. I agree, man.
Because we're still talking about it 25, 30 years
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Still worth making an episode out of for sure.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's cool, man.
Yeah, my house just went into chaos mode behind me, so I have to roll out here. But Tim, it was really great having you today. It's great seeing you again. We'll have to think up our next concept for our next duo video. But
Cool. I'd love
yeah,
to hear your speakers sometimes we can get together.
yeah, sounds good, Tim.
Yeah. All right, buddy. Thank you, man.
Yeah, thanks for your time today. Take care, dude.